Welcome to my channel, my dear friends. Today we are going to discuss about the sulci and gyri of the cerebrum. As we are going to study the neuroanatomy in a short videos, I have chosen this topic for easy understanding. Before going to study all the parts of the cerebrum and the brain, so we should know about the sulci and gyri of the cerebrum. For accommodation in a limited space within the rigid cranial box, the cerebral cortex is folded into numerous gyri or convolutions separated by the sulci or fissures. Eventually, the total surface area of the cortex of human brain is increased to about 2,200 centimeters square, in which only one-third of the cerebral cortex is exposed as gyri and two-thirds is hidden in the sulci. Up to the third month, we cannot find any other sulci in the intrauterine life. So, during the fourth month, we can identify the lateral sylvian fissure or lateral sulcus. Then, in the seventh month, we can identify. In the seventh month, we can identify all other sulci. Okay, so today we are going to discuss about all the sulci and gyri, but I'm not going to discuss about all the sulci, but important sulci and gyri I'm going to discuss about in this class. So here you can see that it is the superior lateral surface of cerebrum. The main sulci which we can identify here is the lateral sylvian fissure or lateral sylvian sulcus and central sulcus of Rolando. Central sulcus of Rolando, lateral sylvian fissure, and here you can identify most posterior. You can identify the in front of 4 centimeters in front of the occipital pole, we can identify the pre-occipital notch. At the same plane, we can identify parieto-occipital sulcus. So these four sulcus which we can identify at the superior lateral surface of cerebrum. Then in the medial surface of cerebral hemisphere, we can identify commissural fibrous band. The right and left cerebral hemispheres are connected by these bands of fibers called as corpus callosum. Parts of this corpus callosum from anterior to posterior are rostrum, then genu, then you can identify the trunk or body, and most posteriorly we can identify the splenium. So what are the sulci and gyri which we can identify at the medial surface? Let us see that. A triangular shaped sulcus which we can identify most posteriorly at the level of parieto-occipital sulcus, and then this parieto-occipital sulcus is connected to the calcarine sulcus posteriorly. So between the parieto-occipital sulcus and the calcarine sulcus, which we can identify a triangular shaped region called as cuneus. In front of this cuneus, we can identify the precuneus area. Then which we can identify above the corpus callosum. Above the corpus callosum, we can identify another sulcus called as cingulate sulcus. Cingulate sulcus or sulcus cinguli. This sulcus cingulate, which is extending from anterior to posterior, and then it is extending backwards and upwards, and is reaching to the superior medial border of cerebral hemisphere. And also most anteriorly, which we can identify para-olfactory gyrus. Para-olfactory gyrus. We can identify two different sulci, anterior and the posterior para-olfactory sulcus. Between that, we can identify para-olfactory gyrus anteriorly, posteriorly paraterminal gyrus. And below this one, at the inferior surface also we can identify different sulci and the different gyri. Below this calcarine sulcus, we can identify the gyri is called as lingual gyrus. This gyrus is called as lingual gyrus. Then we are going to see different other sulci and gyri are. So at the inferior surface, which we can identify two different sulci. The above one is the rhinal sulcus, below one is occipitotemporal sulcus. Above one is rhinal sulcus, below one is occipitotemporal sulcus. So above the rhinal sulcus, which we can identify the area, this gyrus is called as parahippocampal gyrus. Parahippocampal gyrus. So this is very important one. The parahippocampal gyrus anteriorly is extending, and then it is extending towards medially. That medial extension is called as uncus. These are the main important sulci and gyri which we can identify in this particular. So at this medial surface of cerebral hemisphere, which we can identify the corpus callosum over here. So above the corpus callosum, we can identify immediately above the corpus callosum, we can identify the callosal sulcus. So above the callosal sulcus, we can identify another sulcus called as the cingulate sulcus that I already have discussed about it. So between the cingulate sulcus and the callosal sulcus, the projection, the gyrus is called as the cingulate gyrus. Just behind this cingulate gyrus, you can identify sawtooth gyrus, which is exactly present above the parahippocampal gyrus. This gyrus name is called as dentate gyrus. At the inferior surface, which we can identify two different surfaces. Anteriorly, we can identify the orbital surface. Posteriorly, the large one is tentorial surface. On the orbital surface, we can identify the H-shaped sulcus, which is dividing the orbital surface into anterior, posterior, medial, and lateral. Medial to this H-shaped sulcus, which we can identify a sulcus called as olfactory sulcus, which is lodging the olfactory tract. The tentorial surface, already we have discussed about it. Rhinal sulcus medially, and then laterally we can identify occipitotemporal sulcus. That is the end of today's class. Thank you, dear students.